Have you ever felt so engrossed in a task or activity that you missed the meal and didn't even notice the hours flying by? More importantly, you feel so great at the end of the session and get a surprising amount of solid work done. That experience was called a flow state, and you can actually use it to achieve peak performance. Hi, I'm Angela from GrowthGarden. In this video, we'll address some facts and myths about flow. That includes how you can actually get into it and achieve breakthrough results while feeling really high in the process. I'll be drawing some foundational ideas from the forefather of flow, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and sharing my personal insights and formula after testing out different approaches to figure out what works and what doesn't. So, what is flow exactly? Flow is a mental state where you feel your best and perform at your best. Some people refer to it as being in the zone. It's when you're so completely absorbed and focused on what you're doing that the world just fades away. It's just you and the task at hand. The ideas and outputs are just flowing through you effortlessly with no sense of resistance or friction. If you've experienced it before, then you know immediately what I mean. But if it sounds boring to you, I'll be sharing a few examples later to give you a better sense of what it's like. Because with the right conditions, anyone can achieve a flow state. That brings us to the next question. How do you actually get in flow? To answer this question, we need to address some facts and myths about flow. Csikszentmihalyi originally highlighted just 3 ingredients. To get in flow, you need to focus on a clear, singular task, have immediate feedback to know how well you're doing, and operate at the edge of your abilities. The task must be challenging enough that you use your skills to the fullest, but not so tough that you start to feel anxious. Other sources cited 8 factors, though if you look closely, you see that the items at the bottom are actually the effects of flow and not the ingredients that you put into the process. More recently, Stephen Kotler even mentioned 20 triggers for flow. Several other experts also suggest that you can fully control or switch on flow as and when you want. I'm not a scientist and I can't test their claims, but from my experience, that is not how flow works. You don't just complete a checklist and magically enter a flow state. Because if that was true, all of us would be in flow all the time. To answer the question, how to get in flow, I'm going to share 3 phases that I personally go through. I'll also explain how they relate to the 8 factors that we just saw earlier. Now, think back on your last trip. As you were waiting at the gate, you might see the airport crew busily preparing the aircraft. And after you board, the aircraft starts to taxi, eventually it reaches the runway, and starts to accelerate until you take off. Entering a flow state is something like that. Let's start with the first phase, the preparation stage. To fly safely to your destination, you must make sure that your aircraft is properly maintained and fueled for the flight. Likewise, to get in flow and perform at peak performance, you must prepare your mind, body, and environment. Specifically for flow states, you need several components. First, have a singular goal in mind. Sometimes, goals are about setting a specific output by a certain time, like run 3 km in 30 minutes. But that's not the kind of goals that you need for flow state. You just need to define one thing that you focus on for the session. Say, writing a book, coming up with a business plan, or developing a new program. That way, you free up your mind from all other tasks and direct your full mental capacity toward just one thing. A second related ingredient to focus on is meaningful and rewarding work. We tend to complain that our jobs are either too boring and meaningless on one hand, or too stressful on the other. Sometimes, the issue isn't with the work itself, but how we see and approach the work. You can virtually take any task and challenge yourself to do it faster, better, or with a bigger impact. Ask yourself, how can I make this work more fun, more challenging, or more satisfying? Treat it like a game, so you feel engaged without feeling stressed or anxious. For now, let's move into the last ingredient to prepare for your flow session. Set up the time and place for focused work. Let's start with time. Going back to our airplane analogy, you need a minimum length of runway for your plane to take off successfully. Likewise, you need enough time to fully immerse yourself in a task before flow can set in. By default, I block off 2 hours because many studies suggest that the ideal period for focused work is between 90 to 120 minutes. And more importantly, you want to set aside a chunk of time after the 2-hour session. Because once you get in flow, you can go on for hours and hours and you don't want to break it. I think my record was like more than 8 hours at a go. We'll come back to this because it's related to phase 3. We also need our physical space to be conducive for focused work. To prevent distractions, we must clear everything from the work area except for the things required for the task at hand and maybe a water bottle. Turn off all notifications on your digital devices or remove them altogether if they're not required for your task. Before that, make sure you have a good night's rest and some light food. In another video, we cover exactly how to prepare yourself for any sort of focused work. Now, your aircraft is all prepared and you're ready to taxi to the runway. That brings us to phase number 2. This is basically the start of your focus work session where you focus singularly on the priority that you've identified. No multitasking, no distractions. There are 2 other ingredients involved in this phase, though you won't even have to think very hard about it if you have set things up properly earlier. These 2 ingredients are interlinked, so do stick around to see the full picture. Once you get how they come together, you will never see your work the same way again. A critical component of flow is to work at the edge of your abilities. Csikszentmihalyi calls this the challenge to skills ratio, and researchers have arrived at the ideal number of 4%. I personally find that a bit too technical. The main idea is to calibrate the task to the skill level. It shouldn't be so easy that it's boring, neither should it be so challenging that it's scary. A practical way to do that is to consider the skills involved, then find ways to push your current limits by just a little bit more. For example, you can try to improve your design using a technique that you read about. Experiment with a new ingredient in your usual cooking. Or if you can already write 1,000 words per day, how about pushing it to 1,200 words? This is closely linked to the second ingredient for focused work, getting immediate feedback. When you first learn how to ride a bike, you don't exactly know when you've learned it. You keep struggling, falling, and then suddenly, you find yourself riding a good distance before you topple over. It's like things just clicked in place and you just got it. That's because in the process of learning, you get these micro moments of immediate feedback. You start falling to the left, so you tell yourself to lean right and vice versa. It happens in split seconds, but it provides a rapid signal and response cycle to help you do course correction and improvements on the fly. All of us have the ability to learn that way. And when you're focused, you learn much faster and get things done much more quickly. This is what sets apart, say, ordinary bikers from professional cyclists and stunt bikers. The pros devote time to train and push themselves, like doing obstacle courses or challenging terrains, to hone their techniques with real-time feedback. So how can you apply this to your focused work? Basically, you need to build enough skills and experience in an area to have a mental criteria of what a good output looks and feels like, to be able to tell if you're on track, and if not, to make the self-corrections as you go along. This nuance is crucial for flow. And what's great about these 2 ingredients is that they fit into each other. As you push yourself along the edge of a challenge and start to see results, you feel excited and motivated to keep going, which gives you even more feedback. So within a matter of hours, you can drastically expand your skills and the limits of your abilities. If you keep doing this, there's a good chance that you enter into a flow state. There's the last phase when your plane picks up enough speed on the runway to finally take off. The good news is there's not much more that you need to do at this point. All those stuff that we hear about flow, from how time stands still to how you lose all sense of self-consciousness, the sense of focus and enjoyment, those things just happen when you're in flow. It's not something that you consciously control. All you need to do at this point is to enjoy the peak mental state and to keep going without breaking the momentum. Which is why I emphasize the need to set aside a chunk of time after the 2 hours of focused work that you've scheduled. That way, if you enter a flow state, you can keep going for hours. Wait, you may be thinking, did you just say that after all that hoo-ha, I might not even enter into a flow state? Yes, but it's still worthwhile to go through the process, and here's why. There's actually a difference between focused work and a flow state. And that's something that experts don't tell you when they give you a checklist of items to turn on your state of flow. Let's take a closer look at the 3 phases of flow. You can consciously manage the first and second phases to prepare for a focus session and engage in focused work for 2 full hours. But from my experience and research, there is no 100% guarantee that you enter into a state of flow. Back to the aircraft example. Do you notice that on certain days, the plane seems to take forever to taxi to the runway, but on other days, it seems to be in the air in no time at all? It really depends on where the aircraft is parked, the traffic conditions for that day, and so on. Likewise, depending on your physical mental state and the task at hand, you may not always gain enough momentum to take off into the flow state. For example, my business reading graphics summarizes non-fiction books. Even with the team, I personally read every single book, and I'm heavily involved in turning the ideas into visual infographics. Such work takes deep focus. Even if I create the right conditions for my work, there'll always be days when I just feel off form. Maybe I didn't sleep well the previous night, something's on my mind, or my brain is just fuzzy and whatever I create just isn't on point. On such days, I usually stop work after the end of the 2 hours and switch to other less demanding tasks. But there are days when I settle very quickly into the task, my brain is clear and sharp, and before long, the words and ideas are just literally flowing out of me. I can go on for hours even without a toilet break. And what's really amazing is that I feel energized and not drained by the end of the session. That is probably why Csikszentmihalyi refers to the flow state as a psychic experience, because it's as if the ideas are flowing through you and not from you, like you're a conduit for an endless source of inspiration and energy. This doesn't mean that you have zero control over your flow states. You can make sure that the ingredients are in place, like preparing your mind, body, and environment, pushing the limits of your abilities, and so on. Here's another nuance. It may take a few focus sessions to build your knowledge and skills to the point you get in flow. When I was first conceptualizing reading graphics as a business, I remember spending many days doing market research and trying out different ways to create effective summaries and infographics. That was focused work, but I wasn't in flow. Then one day, I sat down as usual, but something was different. Maybe it was because of the amount of ideas and knowledge that I built up over the previous sessions, and I was in the right frame of mind. Suddenly, things just clicked into place. I recall going for 6 hours straight. And by the end of it, I had the pricing model, copy points for the websites, and all the materials that I needed to get the business launched. When we are new to something, self-correction doesn't come naturally. We must still consciously check what we are doing, and it's harder to get in flow when you're sort of starting and stopping. With practice, the process starts to feel more natural, and you can literally flow with it. If you study top athletes or performers, you find a similar pattern. They might train regularly, prepare themselves for every major competition, and enter into a flow state regularly. That's when the audience fades away, the troubles fades away, and it's just them and their performance in that moment. Yet, there will always be days when they're just not on form. This is what NBA All-Star Steph Curry says about being in the zone.
I do believe in the zone because it's the one time that everything kind of goes autopilot. There's just synergy with everything that you're trying to do, and even your intentions are then validated by the atmosphere around you, where it seems like everything else is going right at the same time. You kind of get lost in that moment.
Tapping into your flow state is a great way to get more done while expanding your skills and feeling extremely satisfied in the process. The most effective approach for me so far is to focus on the first two phases, to create the conditions and train your mind for deep focus so you're more likely to get in flow. Even if flow doesn't kick in, you still get 2 hours of focused, productive work, which is great. Give this a try and let us know how it goes. Having said that, I believe that flow is a more advanced form of focused work. If you struggle to even sit down for 5 minutes and you just cannot stop scrolling through your phone, then I recommend that you start with these 2 videos first to learn how to start focusing and to overcome digital distractions. I'll see you in those videos.